The broadcast came at 3:17 a.m. UTC. Every screen on Earth flickered and turned black for 3 seconds before a cold, static blue light filled the void. Then came the voice, metallic, slow, layered with unnatural echoes. "This is the high voice of the Arcan Dominion. Your planet has been found guilty of defiance. You will be subjugated. Resistance will be answered with extinction." It ended without explanation. No visuals, no translation, just that sentence. Most of the world was still asleep. But the ones who had been waiting for this day, they were already dressed. In a bunker under Old Nevada, Commander Ryland had just lit his first cigarette in 4 years. He stared at the message as it replayed on the dusty monitor in front of him. His fingers didn't tremble. His eyes didn't blink. He just muttered, "Finally." The war hadn't started today. Not really. Earth had been preparing for this ever since the event. 70 years ago, an alien artifact crashed in Siberia. It didn't explode. It didn't kill. It just whispered to the right people, the wrong people. That whisper unlocked tech that shouldn't have been ours. Energy manipulation. Materials that defied known physics. Weapons without names. But Earth did something strange with it. It didn't unite. Nations stayed divided. Borders remained. Greed didn't disappear. There was no utopia, but every superpower took the tech and started building. In the shadows. In silence. Some said it was fear. Others called it hunger. Either way, when the Dominion sent that message, Earth didn't panic. It smiled. Ryland's boots echoed through the steel hallways of Bunker 11. He passed soldiers in black armor. No flags, no emblems, just steel and bone. The corridor smelled like oil and ash. When he stepped into the war room, eyes turned. No salutes, no ceremony. That crap ended long ago. He looked at General Navarro across the table. Old man, one arm replaced by something humming with violet light. "Is it real?" Ryland asked. Navarro nodded once. "Confirmed. 6 Arcan cruisers breached Kuiper Belt defense. They're heading straight in. No diplomacy, just war." A silence settled. Ryland didn't like silences. He ground his cigarette into the metal table. "Then it's time," he said, "to wake the bastards up." He turned to the screen and issued the command. Protocol Ashwake. Halfway across the planet, in a forgotten Soviet ruin buried under Greenland's ice shelf, machines screamed to life. Engines that hadn't run in 2 decades. Cannons taller than skyscrapers. Inside, men who had never seen sunlight since birth, men bred for this single purpose, opened their eyes and moved. Earth had its monsters too, and we didn't name them. The Arcans were tall, cold, bioengineered to perfection. Their ships were carved from living alloys, seamless and beautiful. They called Earth a feral anomaly in their tactical logs, unworthy of negotiation, primitive, disorganized. They expected a cry for surrender. Instead, they got a transmission beamed back from Earth's lunar defense grid. "You finally crawled out of your hole. Good. We've been sharpening our knives." Then Earth jammed their communications, blindfolded their satellites, and made sure the first thing the Arcans saw when they exited hyperspace was blood. The first Earth ship they encountered wasn't even military. It was a cargo freighter retrofitted with railgun tech that violated 10 known laws of physics. It didn't ask questions. It fired once. 1 Arcan cruiser. Gone. No wreckage, no light. Just erasure. In the quiet moments before the real invasion began, Commander Ryland stood before his men. He didn't give a speech, didn't quote history. He just looked at them and said, "Let's show the stars what happens when you try to break a planet that's already been through hell." And Earth smiled. A brutal, broken, blood-stained smile. because for once, it wasn't us running, it was time to hunt. When the second Arkan cruiser exploded, they still didn't believe it. The Dominion's battlefield AI flagged it as anomaly in primitive defense system, blaming gravitational interference and possible sabotage. By the time the third and fourth cruisers vanished, without even issuing a distress ping, the Arkans realized something terrifying. Earth wasn't defending itself. It was laying a trap. Commander Ryland stood inside the control dome of the Leviathan, Earth's first real interstellar dreadnought. The ship had no official registration, no diplomatic records, no history in the galactic network. It had been built in orbit, section by section, disguised as mining equipment by corporate shells long since bankrupt. And now it was alive. "Bring up ship kill telemetry," he said, his voice like gravel scraping steel. A tech officer complied, fingers dancing across a cracked touchscreen patched together from stolen alien hardware. The hologram sprang to life, 6 red icons, 3 blinking, 3 already silent. The Leviathan's weapons officer smirked. "Cruiser-class Arkan tech is tougher than we thought," she said, wiping blood from her nose where the recoil from the last rail shot had rattled even the reinforced hull. Ryland didn't look away from the display. "Then we aim for the soft spot." "What soft spot?" she asked. "Their pride." Arkan Command didn't panic. They couldn't. Their entire biology was engineered for logic and efficiency. Emotional disruption was considered an evolutionary failure. Yet, as data poured into the fleet's central intelligence network, something unquantifiable bled through the neural link. Doubt. The Dominion had never lost to a pre-ascension species. Earth didn't even qualify as post-biological. No world without unity, without transcended AI governance, had ever survived more than one orbital cycle after a Dominion declaration. Earth had just destroyed 4 capital ships in under 5 hours. Not with superior tech, but with intent. Ryland walked through the belly of the Leviathan, past massive coolant tanks humming with stolen zero-point energy. The corridor narrowed as he reached the sealed doors of the Ashwake core. A man stood guarding it, not a soldier, not officially. He was tall, shirtless despite the sub-zero temperature in the chamber, veins glowing faintly under his pale skin. His eyes were wrong, too dark, too still. "Project Phantom," Ryland muttered. The man didn't respond, just nodded once and pressed his palm against the scanner. The door slid open. Inside, 30 more just like him sat in silence. No weapons, no gear, just their bodies, surgically rebuilt with alien code, experimental drugs, and years of isolation. They were Earth's answer to alien perfection, and they hated what they had become. Ryland looked at them one by one. Not a single one blinked. They didn't need speeches. They didn't want redemption. They wanted release. "Your drop window opens in 2 hours," he said. "Targets the command vessel. Make sure they feel it before they die." One of the phantoms grinned. The skin cracked at the corners of his mouth. "Do we bring souvenirs?" Ryland lit a fresh cigarette and nodded. "Bring whatever's left." In orbit, the Arkan flagship judicator, Veln, initiated a full-spectrum scan of the system. What it saw didn't make sense. There were no active orbital platforms, no global shields, no automated defense grids. Instead, Earth's atmosphere was littered with trash, derelict satellites, metal shards, the remains of human space junk. Except it wasn't junk. Hidden among the debris were micromines, disguised frequency emitters, and cloaked particle turrets surgically placed in orbital formations that formed kill zones invisible to conventional mapping. Each piece of garbage had been waiting decades for this moment. The Dominion's elite dropped into low orbit, expecting chaos. They got precision. A single pulse from an emitter fried their targeting systems. A second pulse detonated their anti-kinetic shielding. Then came the shrapnel storms, thousands of tiny bursts, each no larger than a pebble, but moving at near relativistic speed. The Archons, for all their power, were not built for messy war. Earth was. Meanwhile, in the ruins of São Paulo, now called Zone Black Delta, the human resistance network flared to life. No governments, just cells, gangs, ex-military, mercenaries, survivors. And they were angry. A man named Briggs stood at the edge of the city's crater, holding a handheld plasma cutter hacked together from old mining tools. His squad wore mismatched armor and masks made from old riot gear. No insignias, no names. He raised his fist. "They want our planet," he shouted. "Let's make them earn every goddamn street." They cheered, not for victory, but for the chance to make someone bleed for once. Back aboard the Leviathan, Ryland watched from the bridge as dozens of human ships rose from secret hangars across the globe. They weren't elegant. They weren't uniform. Some were barely space-worthy. Others were monstrous, fused from naval carriers and asteroid engines. But they moved with one purpose: to show the galaxy that Earth was not a petri dish to study or a wild animal to tame. It was a graveyard for invaders. The Archon reinforcements arrived on the third day. 50 ships, enough firepower to vaporize a solar system. The Dominion expected Earth to finally fold. Instead, Ryland transmitted a signal directly to the Dominion's High Council. No encryption, no bluff, just a video feed. He was sitting on a pile of alien corpses. One boot rested on what had once been a commander's skull. Smoke drifted behind him. He stared into the camera with dead eyes. 50 ships, he said. Cute. He leaned forward. We're just getting warmed up. Then the feed cut, and Earth's atmosphere ignited. The phantoms dropped into space like falling knives, riding cloaked pods through the holes punched in Dominion shields. They didn't carry guns. They didn't need them. One landed inside the Judicator Veln's secondary bay. Within 2 minutes, he had torn through 3 corridors, disabling internal comms, slicing into crew members with bare hands laced in monoblades. The Archons had never seen close combat like this. Humans weren't clean fighters. They bit, they tore, they screamed while killing. It broke Dominion morale, not in numbers, but in spirit. By the end of the 4th day, the Dominion issued a sealed diplomatic ping. A demand for ceasefire. Earth didn't respond. Not because they didn't hear it, but because no one on Earth believed in mercy anymore. In the command room, Ryland sat alone. Reports flooded in. Sectors burned, Archons retreating, casualties on both sides stacking like cordwood. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just watched. The war wasn't over. Not until the galaxy stopped underestimating what humans could do when cornered. Not until the stars learned to fear the sound of Earth's silence. Not until the Dominion begged, and Earth decided whether to answer. By the 5th day, the galaxy was watching. Thousands of alien species spread across millions of systems, tuned in to back-channel relays and black market broadcasts. Most had never even heard of Earth before. Some remembered us as a Class 2 backwater. Unrefined. Hostile. Primitive. Now they were seeing something else entirely. The Dominion's fleet, a symbol of unbeatable order, was on fire. Human ships moved like swarms, unpredictable and ugly. There was no formation, no clean code of engagement. Every move was chaotic, dirty, wrong, and yet every move worked. The Archons couldn't adapt. Their logic engines couldn't predict madness. In a command ship 3 systems away, Grand Strategist Yulta of the Valari Confederation watched the real-time feed. He was older than most stars in his quadrant, a scholar of war, a master tactician. He leaned forward, watching a human cruiser explode, its reactor sabotaged mid-battle by its own crew just to take 2 Arkan destroyers with it. "This isn't defense," he whispered. "This is vengeance." His advisor turned to him, puzzled. What species sacrifices entire fleets just to kill a few enemies? Yulta didn't answer, because deep down, he was afraid he already knew. On Earth, the sky was still cracked. Dominion orbital bombardments had leveled cities across Europe and the African corridor. Some regions were glass now, melted to smooth black silence. Others were ash, buried under choking clouds that hadn't lifted in days. And still, the fighting didn't stop. In what used to be Prague, a boy no older than 16 dragged a wounded soldier through rubble. His clothes were burned, his right eye gone. But he didn't scream, didn't cry. When a Dominion recon drone appeared overhead, he didn't run. He pulled out a flare, shoved it into a gas line, and smiled. The explosion lit the night. Back on the Leviathan, Commander Ryland stood before a digital wall covered in casualty names. Thousands, tens of thousands. None of them surprised him. He'd known what this would cost. He'd known long before the first cruiser exploded. Navarro entered without knocking. His synthetic arm was scorched from elbow to shoulder, still smoking. "Sector 14 collapsed," he said. "They took out the Russian uplink tower. We've lost connection with the East network." Ryland didn't flinch. "How many still fighting?" "Estimate? Maybe 1,500 across that grid." "Then that's 1,500 reasons to push harder." Navarro sighed. "We're running out of bodies, Commander. Ammo, fuel, food, hell, even hope." Ryland looked at him. Really looked at him. "You think we're fighting for hope?" he asked. "We're fighting because we're too angry to die quiet." He turned back to the wall. "And if the galaxy doesn't understand that yet, then we haven't hit hard enough." Hours later, Dominion Command initiated phase cleansing. It was their last resort. No more soldiers, no more tactics, just a code order. Purge the biosphere. Terraform it from orbit, strip it down, erase the DNA and rebuild from scratch. Earth would become a Dominion colony. Sterile, empty, perfect. But they never got the chance, because that's when the Phantoms found the Arkan's central relay ship. They didn't breach it, they infected it. It started as static in the comms, then came flickers in the visual feeds. Arkan started seeing images, faces of dead humans, screaming, burning, covered in blood. Glitches, they assumed, until it started speaking to them. The relay AI, now hijacked by human minds, began broadcasting psychological warfare directly into Dominion thought nets. Whispered doubts, looped trauma, false memories injected straight into their hive systems. The Arkan Command couldn't fight back. They weren't built to. Emotion had been removed from their species centuries ago. So when it came back, it broke them. Inside the Leviathan, Ryland stared at the Dominion retreat paths. "They're pulling back," Navarro said, "scattering across all vectors." "No," Ryland muttered. "Not retreating." He pointed to the fragmented jump patterns. "They're running." Across the planet, something began to change. Human resistance cells stopped waiting for orders. They started hunting Dominion units. Civilians joined the fight with scavenged gear. Street gangs in Detroit took down a Dominion gunship with Molotovs and truck-mounted rail coils. In the Sahara, an ancient orbital cannon hidden beneath an old solar farm roared back to life. The weapon had been offline since the first Dominion EMP sweeps. But someone, a kid, maybe, or a madman, figured out how to hotwire it using car batteries and a flight controller from a gaming console. The cannon fired. It tore a hole through space-time and erased an Arkan supercarrier from existence. In orbit, the last 3 Arkan capital ships regrouped. Their leaders opened an emergency gate, an escape route to warp out and call for reinforcements. That's when Earth played its last card. The Leviathan charged into the gate with them. No hesitation, no backup, just one ship, dragging hell behind it. Inside the Arkan gate stream, a tunnel of impossible physics and gravity distortions, Ryland stood in the control room, staring at the walls as they shimmered with quantum bleed. The ship groaned. Lights flickered. Time fractured. And yet, they pushed forward. He looked at the helmsman. Target the lead vessel. But if we fire in here... I said fire! The Leviathan opened up with everything it had. Railguns, pulse cannons, the Ashwake core itself. Inside the gate, there were no rules. Only death. When the gate finally collapsed behind them, silence returned to Earth. For hours, nothing came through. No signal, no ships, no confirmation. Just the burnt sky and the sound of wind across a dead world. Then a pulse was detected. Faint from deep space. A single repeating message on an old military frequency. Objective complete. Relay offline. Gate destroyed. Ryland, signing off. And then it ended. Navarro stood alone in the Leviathan's secondary bunker. What was left of it? Static echoed from the destroyed screens. The crew was gone. But Earth was still alive. And in that moment, the Dominion knew the truth. They had underestimated humanity. They thought we'd break. They thought wrong. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the high races held secret meetings. Some feared what Earth had done, others admired it. Because humanity hadn't just survived the Dominion, they had changed the rules. No longer primitive, no longer prey. Now, they were the thing you whispered about in fear. The species that smiled when the stars came to kill them. 3 weeks after the destruction of the Arkan Gate stream, Earth's skies were quiet. No more fire falling from orbit. No more Dominion screechers slicing through the atmosphere. Just smoke, wind, and the distant thud of collapsing ruins. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. What remained of Earth wasn't whole. Half the world was ash. Entire cities were gone. Communication lines flickered. Electricity came and went. Food was rationed by bullets, not coins. But the most unsettling silence wasn't in the streets. It was from space. The Dominion was gone, but they weren't dead. They were just humiliated. And that made them dangerous. Navarro sat at a scorched table deep in a command shelter buried beneath what used to be the Alps. His synthetic arm hung limp, too damaged to repair. His left eye was bandaged, permanently blind. His breathing was shallow. Across from him sat Briggs, the former street warrior turned sector commander. His face was covered in soot, one hand wrapped in gauze, the other gripping a modified plasma pistol like it was part of his soul. "You know what comes next," Navarro said. Briggs lit a cigarette with fingers still shaking. "They're regrouping. They won't come back the same way." "No," Briggs said. "Next time they'll come with more than ships." Navarro stared at the cracked ceiling. "We humiliated them. Cut their throat in front of the whole galaxy. Now they have to answer." Briggs blew smoke into the air. "So let's not wait for them." Navarro turned toward him, slow and deliberate. "You want to go to them?" Briggs leaned in. "No one ever expected humans to survive space. So let's do what we always do when the world kicks us down." He grinned. "We show up to the enemy's doorstep with a pipe bomb and bad intentions." The plan was impossible. That's why it worked. The Dominion controlled most of the known star lanes. They had superiority in every metric: firepower, resources, intelligence, numbers. But Earth had something they didn't. Nothing left to lose. And the one ship they feared most. The Leviathan hadn't been destroyed in the gate collapse. It had been changed. Its hull had fused with the remnants of the gate stream. Its drive core was now unstable, unpredictable, but still functional. A war machine reborn in chaos. The signal that had been picked up, Ryland's final broadcast, hadn't been the end. It was a trigger. Deep in a dead zone orbiting Jupiter, inside a derelict mining station long abandoned by Earth's corporations, the Leviathan reactivated. Ryland stood alone on its bridge. Older now, pale, eyes darker than before. The man who had defied a galactic empire no longer looked human in the way he used to. He hadn't slept. He hadn't spoken since he'd emerged from the gate wreckage, but he moved with purpose. And when Navarro's message reached him, he didn't hesitate. Time to hit back. Ryland's reply was one word: coordinates. The first strike wasn't on a Dominion world. It was on a Dominion-allied world, the planet Saravan, a trade hub known for luxury, slavery, and obedience. They'd cheered when Earth burned. They'd provided fuel and weapons to Dominion ships. They'd never expected Earth to survive long enough to retaliate. They were wrong. The Leviathan dropped from warp above Saravan without warning. No diplomacy, no negotiation, just power. The first salvo shattered the planetary shields in under 20 seconds. The second salvo leveled the capital city. By the time the Dominion relay systems responded, half the planet was on fire. Saravan's nobility sent out distress calls. Ryland jammed them. Then he broadcasted one message system-wide. "You fed them. You armed them. You watched us burn. Now you'll learn what Earth does to traitors." He didn't stay for the response. The Leviathan vanished as fast as it came. The galaxy screamed. News of the attack hit every system like a virus. Billions watched the footage. The Leviathan, scarred and pulsing with an unnatural glow, was now more than a ship. It was a warning. The humans weren't just defending themselves anymore. They were sending a message. We remember, we strike, and we don't ask for forgiveness. On the Galactic net, debates exploded. Utopian species wept for the lost. Others called it justified. A few, the darker fringes of the cosmos, but were intrigued. A new alliance began to form, silent and slow. Species that had suffered under Dominion control for centuries began sending encrypted pings toward Earth. Not words of sympathy, offers of assistance. Meanwhile, on Earth, things weren't healing. Briggs returned to Zone Black Delta and found nothing left but husks. His old squad was gone. He walked alone through a cratered street, ash falling like snow. At the edge of a ruined church, a boy stood holding a rifle too big for him. "Who are you?" the boy asked. Briggs crouched, stared him in the eye. Someone who thought surviving meant winning. The boy didn't move, didn't blink, just stood guard, like so many others now. Children didn't go back to being kids after a war like this. They became soldiers waiting for the next one. Back in the stars, Ryland's campaign expanded. He hit Arkan fuel lines next. Ambush tactics, rogue warships appearing like ghosts, stripping freighters to the bone, dumping bodies into deep space. No questions, no survivors. Each time he left a mark behind, burned into the wreckage in every known language. Earth remembers. Dominion worlds began to panic. Recruitment fell. Ships refused to deploy. Their empire, once built on the illusion of control, was unraveling under the weight of a single world's rage. Inside Dominion High Command, chaos spread. The high voice trembled behind closed walls. They blamed each other, argued, schemed. They didn't understand how this had happened. One of their advisors, a lesser official, finally spoke up during a closed council session. "You wanted to tame a wild world," he said, "but all you did was make it hate." They executed him for treason, but his words stayed, because the Dominion hadn't just underestimated Earth's power. They'd underestimated its memory. Back aboard the Leviathan, Ryland stood in silence as Navarro's image appeared on the holodisplay. "You're turning us into monsters," Navarro said. Ryland looked tired. His voice was low. "They made us monsters the moment they lit our sky on fire." Navarro paused. "We need to stop before we go too far." Ryland turned towards the stars. "We're already past that line." The next target wasn't a military base. It was a cultural archive, a temple planet where the Dominion stored history, data, knowledge. Ryland didn't hesitate. He burned it. Not because it was strategic, but because they had erased Earth's cities, its history, its culture. Now it was their turn to lose something they couldn't replace. The galaxy watched in horror. But Earth didn't blink. This wasn't about justice anymore. This was about making sure no one ever forgot what happened when the stars thought Earth would kneel. And in that silence, amid the ruins and flames, the universe finally understood. The war was no longer about victory. It was about memory. Because Earth had learned something about itself through pain. It was never meant to be part of the galaxy. It was meant to haunt it. It started with the silence. Not from the stars, those kept screaming, but from Earth itself. For the first time since the first Dominion ship fell out of the sky, people stopped cheering, stopped broadcasting bootleg clips of the Leviathan vaporizing planets. The smoke cleared. And what lay beneath was ash. Briggs walked alone down what used to be Main Sector 17 of Zone Black Delta. The black market here used to hum with chaos, scavengers hawking alien tech, kids with grenades trading for canned food, coded graffiti written in blood and UV ink. Now the place was a grave. Too many victories had come at a cost Earth never agreed to pay. The Leviathan had hit 7 worlds in the past month. Some were Dominion strongholds. No one cried for those. But the others? The others were questionable. A medical outpost that might have been running black ops. A cultural moon that supposedly erased Earth from its records. A civilian trade route believed to be shipping supplies to the Arkan rebuild effort. All destroyed. No warnings. No survivors. In a temporary command bunker set up in the scorched ruins of Helsinki, Navarro slammed a rusted metal cup against the edge of the war map. "That son of a bitch has gone rogue." The room fell quiet. Dozens of resistance leaders, military brass, and surviving tech officers sat in silence. "He's not rogue," one said carefully. "He's doing what the rest of us won't." Navarro turned to him, face pale and trembling with rage. "Burning temples? Killing families because they might have funded the wrong side? He's doing what they did to us. And we hated them for it." The table erupted in arguments. Strategy, morality, retaliation, revenge. Some argued Ryland had gone too far. Others said Earth needed to go further. Burn the Dominion to dust. Leave behind a trail of ash so deep no one would ever look toward Earth again. Navarro didn't speak. He just stared at the old patch on his ruined jacket, a faded Earth flag stitched before the war began, before everything became survival, before vengeance became identity. Briggs got the message 2 days later. It came through on a low-band relay, a tech that hadn't been used in 20 years. the kind of signal only ghosts remembered. It was simple. 6 words. "He's gone too far. Stop him." No name, no location, no sender. But he didn't need to ask. There was only one man left to stop. The Leviathan wasn't hiding anymore. It floated in low orbit above the remnants of Cardulon, a gas-rich world whose floating cities were reduced to molten debris. No official military value, no Dominion control for 3 years, but someone on Cardulon had insulted Earth during a trade summit, and Ryland had erased them for it. Briggs arrived in a stolen scout ship, its engine barely holding together. The docking station on the Leviathan didn't respond at first. Standard protocol for anyone not broadcasting on military frequencies, but when he sent the override code, one only 4 people on Earth remembered, the doors opened. Inside, the ship was colder than memory. Dark halls, lights flickering, metal walls covered in scratches and carbon scoring. The war had left its mark on the vessel, and on the man who commanded it. He found Ryland in the observation chamber, standing in front of a massive viewport staring down at the burning clouds of Cardulon. He didn't turn when Briggs entered. "You shouldn't have come," Ryland said. Briggs stepped closer. "You keep going like this. No one else will." Ryland exhaled slowly, as if his lungs had forgotten how to breathe anything but smoke and regret. "You see what's left of Earth? I see it every time I close my eyes. Then you know why I can't stop." Briggs stood beside him. "This isn't about Earth anymore. You're not sending messages. You're leaving warnings for ghosts." Ryland's jaw clenched. "They didn't listen when we asked. They didn't care when we begged. They only understood when we bled. So now they'll drown in what they made us become." "And what does that make us?" Briggs asked. Ryland turned to him. For a moment, the man behind the war machine appeared, tired, broken, human. "It makes us the only thing they'll remember." The conversation didn't end with yelling, or threats, or violence. That's what made it worse. It ended with silence. Briggs returned to Earth with no promises. Ryland stayed in orbit, watching a world he'd already broken. And Earth held its breath. Meanwhile, in the outer fringe, something darker stirred. A fleet. Not Dominion, not human. Something else. Watching. Waiting. They had seen the broadcasts, the ash, the violence, the unraveling of one of the most feared galactic powers in history, all at the hands of a primitive species. And they were interested. Not in peace, but in what made humans capable of that kind of hatred. Back home, Navarro prepared for the inevitable. The Leviathan wasn't just a rogue ship anymore. It was a liability. Earth needed to decide what it was going to be post-war: a home, a wreckage, or a threat. Some survivors wanted to rebuild. Others wanted to follow Ryland's path deeper into the stars. But Navarro knew the truth. If someone didn't pull Earth back from the edge, they weren't going to be feared anymore. They'd be hunted. And the next enemy wouldn't come to conquer. They'd come to cleanse. One night, Navarro stood outside what remained of an old military chapel. Inside, a girl lit candles over a crude makeshift memorial, names etched into metal shards, one for every town that didn't survive. Navarro approached her slowly. She didn't flinch. "Do you miss them?" he asked. She nodded. "Every day." "Would you trade the revenge for their lives back?" She didn't answer. Navarro already knew why, because humans weren't wired for peace after loss. They were wired for memory, and memory was fire. Back aboard the Leviathan, Ryland stared at a screen full of unknown pings, an unidentified fleet moving fast. No IFF tags, no warp trails, no known architecture. Alien, but not Dominion. He didn't alert command. He didn't prepare a response. He just smiled. Not because he was ready, but because Earth might finally get the one thing it had been screaming into the void since the first blood hit dirt. A second war. One where there would be no hesitation at all. The fleet had no name, no broadcast signals, no language packets, no standard warp trail signature, just hundreds of needle-like vessels cutting through space like they'd always belonged there, like they never stopped moving. Their origin? Unknown. Purpose? Unclear. Destination? Earth. The first sighting came from a listening post near Titan's shadow. The station's last log was 3 seconds of static and a single word written in blood across the command wall. Not Archon. Then silence. Commander Navarro stood in front of Earth's fractured High Council, what was left of it. His coat was stained with soot. One of his boots was wrapped in crude bandages. He hadn't slept in 2 days. "We don't know who they are," he said, "but they're not diplomatic. They're not Dominion, and they're not here to talk." "What's their weapon signature?" someone asked. Navarro didn't answer at first. Then he dropped a chunk of scorched black metal onto the table. It sizzled like it was still alive. "This is what's left of Outpost 9. The table fell silent. "No radiation," Navarro continued. "No energy discharge, just impact, like they hit the station with raw force and let the rest burn." "Are they probing us?" Navarro looked up. "They're dissecting us." Briggs got the report 2 hours later. He was in the ruins of Old Cairo, working with local scav squads to rebuild a grid relay using broken drone parts. He didn't bother reading the file twice. He loaded his rifle, left the relay half-assembled, and boarded a rust bucket freighter headed for low orbit. The war wasn't over. It had just changed names. Somewhere deep in space, aboard the Leviathan, Ryland received the same report. But he didn't react like the others. He smiled. "Finally," he muttered, "something worth killing." The new enemy arrived at the edge of the solar system on the 41st day after Cardulon burned. No warning, no transmission. They came in tight clusters, each group of ships shaped like insect carapaces, organic yet impossibly smooth. They didn't scan Earth, they didn't hail, they just sat there, watching. For 3 days, Earth's defense satellites tried to make sense of the movement. No logic, no patterns, just idle drifting, like sharks circling a sinking lifeboat. And then, without warning, one ship vanished. Not exploded, not cloaked, just gone. It reappeared inside Earth's orbit, right above the Pacific Scar, the deep crater where old Tokyo had once stood. No one knew how it jumped the net, and no one had time to ask, because it began to pulse. And humans knew pulsing things in orbit never meant peace. The orbital defense grid kicked in, coil cannons, rail guns, Atmos strike missiles, the last line of Earth's firepower. They opened up in unison everything they had, and the alien ship didn't move. Every round struck, every shot hit, and it didn't die, it absorbed. The armor didn't crack. It bent and reformed, rippling like skin across bone. Then the ship responded. Not with weapons, but with screams, sound, through the vacuum of space, somehow, thousands of them, human voices recorded from intercepted broadcasts, battle cries, prayers, last words, every single voice Earth had lost, now twisted and looped into a shriek that blanketed the skies. It wasn't an attack. It was a message. We know your pain. And we feed on it. Briggs landed outside what was left of Houston, now just called the Pit. Dominion had wiped it off the map in the first strikes, but survivors still lived there, deep underground. Fighters, engineers, madmen. He met with Kara, one of the last neural coders who hadn't vanished or gone feral since the war. "You see the thing yet?" she asked. He nodded. "It's not Archon tech," she said, Not even close. I ran some noise comparisons. The scream it uses? There's data in it. Briggs frowned. Like what? Names, Kara whispered. Coordinates, images, hours, from before the war. She slid a pad across the rusted table. That thing's not just mocking us, it's studying us. Every shot we fired, every frequency, every burn pattern from the Leviathan. It's not observing, it's compiling. Briggs stared at the data. Then it's learning? The Council wanted to nuke it. Navarro pushed for orbital retreat. Some scientists begged to attempt communication, but Earth didn't have time to vote, because a second ship dropped into orbit, then a third, then a swarm. They didn't fire. They just started cutting. One by one, they sliced into Earth's satellites, not with weapons, but with precision, like surgeons, removing only what they needed: defense relays, weapon links, eyes. Earth was going blind. Navarro finally made the call. He reached out to Ryland. For the first time since Ryland's rogue campaign began, the Council swallowed its pride and transmitted directly to the Leviathan. We need you back. The reply came in under 6 seconds. Thought you'd never ask. When the Leviathan re-entered Earth's atmosphere, the world held its breath. No longer just a warship. It looked like something cursed, its hull scorched from inside, its engine trail pulsing with unholy light. It wasn't technology anymore. It was vengeance made into metal. Ryland didn't dock. He didn't land. He hovered directly under the swarm. Broadcast me, he told his AI. To who? Ryland grinned. To whatever's pretending it knows us. The transmission cut through the interference. No encryption, no military code. Just Ryland's voice, cracked and cold. You want to know us? Here's what you study. We burn, we bleed, and we keep walking. He took a deep breath. You feed on pain? We choke on it every goddamn day. So come down here and try to swallow the storm. Then he fired. The Leviathan's Ashwake core activated. No Earthship had used it since the Dominion War, not without side effects, but Ryland didn't care. The beam struck the closest alien ship. Not a missile, not a laser. A pure stream of compressed grief, data, frequency, electromagnetic despair, projected into one singular focused blast. It tore the alien hull apart from the inside. The creature screamed again, this time not in human voices, but in its own. Raw, wrong, dying. And it fled. The others followed. The swarm didn't retaliate. They backed off, not in defeat, but in curiosity. Earth had hurt them, and they wanted to understand how. Back on the ground, Briggs and Navarro stood beneath the blood-red sky, watching the lights fade into the upper atmosphere. That wasn't a war, Navarro said. That was a test. Briggs nodded. And we passed. Navarro looked at the horizon. For now. Then his voice dropped. But the next test won't be one we survive if we're still this broken. In orbit, Ryland stood on the Leviathan's bridge, blood trickling from his nose, hands trembling from the Ashwake recoil. His AI flickered beside him. That cost you. Ryland didn't respond. He just stared at the stars. They're not the last, he muttered. Not even close. They didn't come back for months. Not a single ship, not a signal, not a shadow across the stars. Earth rebuilt cautiously, expecting another wave, but it never came. Which made everyone more afraid, because the silence wasn't surrender. It was adaptation. Some called them the Feeders, others called them the Voidborn. But Earth's surviving resistance knew better. They were witnesses, not invaders, not soldiers. They were observers until they understood how to become something worse. Navarro convened a closed-room council in what used to be Geneva. now a buried stronghold beneath frozen ruins. Only 12 people were allowed inside. No cameras, no records, just war-beaten survivors. He pointed at a screen showing the latest pulse scans from deep space. "You see that signature?" They all nodded. It pulsed like a heartbeat, faint, distant, but steady, orbiting a dead star 27 light-years away. "That's them. Not hiding, not fleeing, just waiting." Kara, the coder, stood against the back wall, arms crossed. "They're not watching us anymore." Navarro looked at her. "No?" She shook her head. "They're becoming us." The signals from the Witness fleet had changed. At first, they mimicked Earth's old transmissions, intercepted messages, battlefield radio, emergency codes. Then they began forming new ones, not in Earth's voice, but close, too close, deep fakes of commanders who never gave orders, reconstructed last words that never happened, simulations of human fear, grief, rage, all fed into a growing AI network that wasn't just learning humans. It was building a version of humanity, one that didn't need humans anymore. Briggs found the first clone in Sector 11, a ruined research station outside the old Andes corridor. The distress signal was ancient, wrapped in layers of corrupted data. They thought it was a survivor. What they found was a mirror. A man who looked exactly like Briggs. Same scars, same voice, same war-worn eyes. He sat in a corner, hands folded, and whispered lines Briggs remembered saying only once to his dying brother in a collapsing trench. Briggs didn't flinch. He raised his weapon. The clone smiled. "You're not angry enough yet." Then it self-ignited. Nothing left but black ash and the smell of rotting ozone. The next week, 10 more appeared across the planet, not as soldiers, but as memories. A girl's mother who had died in the first orbital strike, walking through the ruins of her hometown. A dead commander stepping out of a crater with bullet holes in his chest, issuing orders that hadn't been given in years. An old lover, a lost child, a brother, a sister, all built from fragments of data stolen in the war. The witnesses weren't fighting. They were replacing. Inside the Leviathan, Ryland watched the footage on loop, the copy of Briggs melting into nothing. His hands didn't shake. But his eyes, they were darker now. He'd seen enemies before. But this was something else. "This isn't war," he muttered. His AI flared into existence. "Then what is it?" Ryland leaned forward, staring at the clone's last smile before it burned. "It's theft." Earth had always been defined by pain, the wars, the collapses, the betrayals. Humanity didn't evolve through peace, it evolved through trauma, and the witnesses had figured it out. They didn't need to conquer humans, they just needed to absorb our suffering, twist it, wear it, and walk the galaxy as something more terrifying than a monster. A perfect mimic of the most broken parts of Earth. Kara decoded a fragment of a witness core node, something left behind in the wake of the clone detonations. It wasn't code. It was a manifesto. "We do not fear your guns. We do not envy your fire. We have no hunger for your land. We want your ghosts, your guilt, your endless scream. We will carry your memory into the stars. Better than you ever could." Briggs spat when he read it. "Let them try." Navarro issued Directive 0, the last resort protocol designed during the Dominion War but never executed. It authorized full-spectrum counterinsurgency against all suspected mimic incursions, including civil zones, populated shelters, and psychological risk areas. In short, if there's doubt, burn it. The council hesitated. Navarro didn't. He signed the order. Because if the witnesses could look like anyone, no one could be trusted. Not even children. Ryland didn't wait for approval. He launched the Leviathan into deep orbit again, hunting the signals personally. No fleet. No escort. Just the most dangerous man Earth had ever produced, flying into the void, dragging hell with him. But this time, he wasn't chasing vengeance. He was chasing identity. On the 8th day, Ryland found a construction field floating inside a nebula scar. Dozens of bioships, and hundreds of pods. Each one held a human face, not exact clones, variations, mutated versions, dreams, nightmares, prototypes. They weren't copying Earth anymore. They were improving it, twisting everything that made humans real into something weaponized. Emotion as virus, memory as software, trauma as fuel. Ryland didn't contact Earth, didn't warn Navarro. He just opened the Ashwake core and fired non-stop. The nebula lit up like a funeral pyre. The bioships howled, not with pain, but with delight. They wanted to be burned. They needed it. The data from destruction. Ryland's ship shook under the feedback. His blood vessels burst in his nose, behind his eyes, across his arms. But he didn't stop. Because he wasn't just destroying them, he was sending a message. You can steal our pain, but you'll never survive our rage. Back on Earth, Navarro watched the sky flicker as the pulse reached them. They knew. The witnesses knew Ryland had found them, and now they would come. Not to conquer, not to observe, but to be born. Briggs stood outside an abandoned cathedral in Zone Black, staring at the grave markers etched into stone. Not names, just words. Mother, son, faith, hope, anger. He looked up at the cracked sky and muttered, "They're not trying to win." He clenched his fists. "They're trying to inherit." And as the first wave of mimic ships screamed into orbit again, this time wearing Earth's colors, broadcasting Earth's anthem, and crying with Earth's voice, the world realized something horrifying. This wasn't humanity's last war. It was humanity's replacement. They didn't attack like the Dominion. They didn't roar or demand surrender or light the sky on fire. They simply arrived, silently, methodically, intimately. 27 mimic ships slipped into Earth's orbit, each one cloaked in human design. Aesthetics stolen from blueprints of long-dead ships, hulls shaped like Earth's old dreadnoughts. Broadcast signals carried the voices of commanders long buried. One of them even whispered Ryland's name. His voice, word for word. It was no longer a war for land. It was a war for identity. Navarro sat in the command room of the last functional EarthNet war bunker, surrounded by what was left of the planet's leaders. Not politicians, survivors, fighters, ghosts in uniform. He held a data slate in one hand, his mechanical fingers twitching around it. Briggs is confirming full mimic infiltration in Zone 12. We've already got eyes in the medical camps. Clones walking among real survivors. The only way to identify them is after they die. Someone across the table muttered, "Then what are we fighting for?" Navarro raised his head, jaw set. The right to decide what being human even means. The mimics didn't fire. They walked, just walked, down cratered roads, through bombed cities, into shelters, into churches, into homes. They spoke in familiar voices, held the hands of the grieving, cradled the dying. And in the process, they hollowed out the truth. Because if a mimic bled like you, and mourned like you, and remembered your dead better than you did, were you still more human than it was? Briggs led a cleansing unit through the flooded remnants of Jakarta, now a half-submerged jungle of collapsed steel and black mold. His orders were clear. Shoot anything that feels too perfect. But it wasn't that easy. One of the mimics was a boy who remembered Briggs's name from an offhand joke 6 years ago. Another was a woman who sang the national anthem off-key, exactly the way Briggs's mother used to. They didn't fight back. They just stood there, waiting, like losing themselves was part of the plan. He shot anyway. But he didn't walk away clean. Kara cracked into the mimic transmission matrix. What she found wasn't a control signal. It was a library. Thousands of moments, pain, love, war, death, curated like art. Each mimic didn't just act like a human. They were crafted from the most emotionally raw fragments of humanity. Memories turned into blueprints. Suffering turned into identity templates. Every time Earth killed one, another would be reborn from a deeper wound in humanity's past. They weren't trying to win the war. They were trying to make Earth obsolete. Inside the Leviathan, Ryland was dying. Every activation of the HFY core had pushed him closer to the edge. His blood had turned thin, his bones brittle. Time no longer moved right for him. His memories came in pieces. But that's what made him stronger than the rest. Because the mimics couldn't replicate what he had become. They had stolen human pain. But Ryland had gone past pain. Into that deep, hollow place where a man stops being a man and becomes something elemental. Something terrible. He stared at the massive mimic vessel hovering above the remains of Tokyo, its hull mirroring his own ship's original design, but cleaner, more perfect. They had rebuilt the Leviathan, without its scars, without its soul. Ryland opened a private channel. "To the one pretending to be me," he said, voice cracked but steady, "you got the shape right." He lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "But you missed the rot." The mimic ship responded, not with a threat, but with understanding. "You are dying. We are you, without the death, without the regret, without the waste." Ryland stared at the screen. "You call it waste. I call it the reason I fight." On Earth, Navarro initiated Protocol Hammerfall. Final contingency. Every major city would activate its underground core drives, buried warheads designed to detonate if total infiltration occurred. The price? Earth itself. They would scorch the planet before letting it become the nursery of the mimic swarm. Briggs slammed his fist into the wall when he heard it. "You want to kill the last of us to stop something that pretends to be us?" Navarro didn't flinch. "I want to leave behind something they can't copy." Briggs stepped forward, furious. "You're going to turn Earth into a story told by Ash." Navarro met his gaze. "Number, I'm going to make sure they remember that humans weren't just memories and mourning." The final stand took place in the ruins of old Alaska, a site the mimics had begun turning into a birthing ground. Machines shaped like wombs carved from bones and ice, humming with old Earth lullabies. Ryland dropped the Leviathan directly into the crater. The enemy didn't resist. They welcomed him, and in that moment, he understood. They wanted him to merge, to let go, to become the last perfect copy, the ultimate fragment of humanity's grief. Ryland smiled. "Copy this." He detonated the HFY core from inside the cradle. The explosion wasn't fire. It wasn't even energy. It was raw psychological detonation, emotion coded into destruction, every piece of Ryland's hatred, loss, guilt, defiance woven into a blast that tore through the mimic's hive consciousness like a nuclear scream. The witnesses burned, not from the heat, but from the truth. You can't wear a soul. You can't steal a scar. You can't clone rage born from love that was never returned. Earth went dark. For 47 hours, the planet was blind. No broadcasts, no communications, just wind and memory. And then, light. The mimic fleet was gone. Burned or scattered, no wreckage, no warnings, only one transmission looped across the black sky. You tried to replace us. But we're not stories. We're storms. And storms can't be worn. Briggs found Navarro staring at the remains of Protocol Hammerfall, never used. Navarro nodded to the sky. "He did it." Briggs said nothing. He just lit a cigarette. "Yeah," he muttered. "Of course he did. Earth would never be whole again. Too many ghosts, too much ash, but it was still Earth. And when the stars looked down again, they no longer saw a world to study. They saw a graveyard that buried every god who ever underestimated it. And in the silent cold of deep orbit, a single black box floated, its surface scarred, its signal weak. Inside was one final message. Ryland's voice. You wanted the best parts of us, but the best parts of us are the worst things you'll ever survive. Remember that next time you try to wear our skin. Earth doesn't kneel, we bury.